Hello everybody, this is Mike, and this is
Duane.
It's no secret, that's my dad. I'm his son. Most of the time he claims me. Growing up in our family, we got together most of every night around 6 o'clock and had dinner. And one of the things after dinner was, when I was younger, I could tell I might have been a nuisance during the day, and my mom kind of wanted to get rid of me, and I don't know if there's some bribing going on, but my dad would offer to take me out driving around farms in the spring, summer, and fall. And I most of the time take him up on it if I didn't have anything better to do, especially, and I enjoyed it. I probably asked a million questions, and hence where some of my knowledge from the industry came, was in those pickup rides in a blue and white truck, maybe even a red and white truck sometimes in the early days. But I'm just going to highlight some of the things I've learned, so maybe it can catch you guys up on some chopper history. Most of the time we spent chasing choppers. And just started off, what's your earliest chopper memory?
My earliest chopper memory is probably with Grandpa, Dad-in-law in Sumas. We were milking 200 and some cows at the time, which was a big deal then. And ironically, it was the 1st of June, and we were still putting up first cutting. Had trouble with the old International chopper we had. Grandpa went to town, got a new John Deere 3960 cutter, and that was kind of a big deal. I was kind of pumped because he wasn't a John Deere guy, but he bought a John Deere 3960, had the small knives. Well, the first day we were using it, because we waited so long to get the hay mowed because it was so wet, he drug piles up in the field, and the first round around the field, he thought he'd get out with a pitchfork and pitch it in, and the pitchfork went through the chopper and bang. Needless to say, we ended up buying that chopper because we blew it up the first day. And I went back to the yard, put new knives in it in about an hour, and we're back running again. But anyway.
Was anyone in that time running self-propelled choppers?
No, that was 1980. And basically there was, to my knowledge, there was really no self-propelled choppers in the county.
So there's no backup plan?
No,
to call someone and
no.
get it finished?
Neighbors maybe could have came over and helped, but they were all in the same position. It rained all May and we couldn't get first cutting down. And back then it'd take you a week to put up 40 acres. I mean, it's way different today.
So you grew up in the Midwest.
Yes, I did.
Did they have choppers out there?
They were starting to have some self-propelled. Field Queen, I mean, you talk about back in the day, you know, Field Queen built a chopper that chopped and was a high dump all in one. And that was kind of the real deal. And so, and Field Queen built high dumps. Heston ended up buying Field Queen, and they are no longer.
So what Field Queen was it a direct through, or did it have auger boxes?
No, it was a cut and throw machine, you know, and you know, antiquated heads, and back in the day that was a bit of a struggle. So Fox had a self-propelled, New Holland had a self-propelled, and John Deere had just come out with their 5400s. I bet you I still have literature in my desk of all them original models. I kept all the first literature.
What was, to your knowledge, the first self-propelled chopper in our area?
Probably a John Deere 5400 or 5460.
And what was the challenges with that, if you remember any?
They were J-knife machines, miserable to sharpen. I mean, everybody thought they were really cool because they had 250 horse. I mean, most tractors were only 100 horse, so at that time that was a big deal. Challenges was the auger box, and the J knives were kind of, you know, they were kind of John Deere's idea at the time, but yeah, they left some challenges.
So in the early days of self-propelled chopping in the area, it was New Holland, John Deere.
That was pretty, and then, yeah, that was pretty much it.
Pretty much it. Then New Holland, did they have a similar design?
New Holland had a cut and throw design on the old red ones. You look at the 1890s. I sold an 1890 to Rich Hudink. That was a little Cat V8, little 3208 V8, and it was a cut. It had a separate blower in it, but the knives put it right into the blower. Set off to the side with a cab. That was quite something. 3-row head. That was considered a big deal.
It seems like everyone was kind of cut and throw except John Deere.
John Deere had an auger box transfer, that's correct.
They held on to that forever, it seems like.
They held on to that till 5830. The 5000 series Deeres actually were the most popular, even though they were somewhat dysfunctional by the way they worked. But they had a nice cab. You know, so the 5460, then you could update the 5460 to Duradrum cutter heads, and then by the time they got to the 20s, they came out with metal detector. And then New Holland came out with their Whopper chopper, 2100, which we have on. We have one of those yet, and we actually have a 5460 here too. So they're still running. You know, that's what's fascinating.
So meanwhile, while we're talking about all these brands, Claas is in Europe, and they have the same design really as this almost does, crop flow design, since the mid '80s. But did you ever dismiss Claas early on, just saying, or did you ever hear about him and say, well, whatever, or how did it come about?
Well, you know, interestingly, it didn't really hit the radar screen for me until John Deere came out with the 6000 series. The problem with the 6000 series is now suddenly Joe Blow, myself, the hick couldn't work on them because you needed computers, they had electrical nightmares, and instantly, and they had to do the 6000 series because of kernel processing. So I should probably back up. Kernel processing came in with the 5830s and it was all will fit. And it worked, but all of a sudden the 5830s didn't have enough power. New Holland had no way at the time to get a kernel processor in. Because of design. John Deere really, it was a patch job to get the kernel processor in there. And suddenly you were barely crawling through the field, and now everybody needed horsepower to go to kernel processing. So the 6000 series came out, and that's kind of when suddenly we're going, well, that came out of Europe. Their 6000 series no longer built in the States. Came out of Europe, well, is that the only place with horsepower? And ironically it was. Europe was a little bit ahead of us on that. And then I kind of backed away from the John Deere 6000 series choppers. Suddenly I see an ad in the Western Producer. Flair Alfalfa has two 860 Claases and two 6810 John Deeres for sale. They were only 1 or 2 years old. I came up there and I could tell that nobody else came up and looked at them. They were alfalfa machines, and I got up there, was only interested in buying one. I looked at these Claas 860s that he had, and they looked a lot nicer than the John Deeres. I didn't say much to him. I got back home, and I thought, you know, before I just offer to buy one, he's not going to take an offer on 4. I'll just make him an offer on all 4. I don't have the money, but I'll just see what he does, right? I made him an offer on all 4 and figured it never happened. He calls me back. He says, well, are you serious? And then I'm going, yeah. Well, you can have them. And then I went, oh no, where am I going to find the money for that? I mean, it was panic moment. I don't remember where I found the money, but we bought all 4. I became a salesman really quick because I ended up selling the 2 Claases almost right away. Sold one to Keelstra's, and I think they're still running it. I sold the 6810 down here. So that was my first incarnation with Claas. And when we got it here, the funny thing about mechanics, they all look at it and go, oh, we don't know nothing about this machine. But once we started working on it, it was easier to work on than the Deeres. So then instantly we had some traction. The next funny story about Claas, you ask about Claas, is so we had sold we probably had sold 30, 40 John Deere self-propelleds, some New Hollands, maybe another dozen New Hollands. Suddenly, you know, we were the chopper dealer. We had John Deere sitting here most of the time. And then Edeling, we already sold them a couple John Deere choppers. They weren't big enough. They couldn't keep up. They wanted to get done quicker. And he comes to me and says, we need a bigger chopper. And I knew where there was an 880 Claas in Sunnyside that the estate was selling, only had 400 hours on it. And I had already approached Claas several times to become a Claas dealer. This is right at 2000, 2001. And they kept turning me down. I priced in this 880 chopper with 400 hours on it. I thought this is a long shot because they wanted us to do all the maintenance on it. I got that. They're a big dairy. He said to me, he says, well, you don't have the franchise yet. What are we going to do about parts? I said, well, we'll take care of it. I'll figure out a way, we'll take care of it. Well, we weren't the John Deere dealer either, right? So we took care of the John Deere. And he knew that. I mean, we took care of his choppers anyway. He came back to me, this is a big deal. This is a big decision. It's a 500 horse machine to be the biggest chopper in the county. And he says to me, he said, tell you what, Duane, I'll make a deal. We'll buy the chopper, but if you don't have the franchise within a year, you got to buy it back. Well, you know, if you're a salesman, you're an optimist, you can handle anything. I said, okay, that sounds like a plan. I'll get the franchise. And he bought the chopper. And I kept trying to get the franchise. This is 2001, 2002. Year goes by, and I knew the date. I knew it well. And I went out to see him. I says, Rob, I don't have the franchise. So what are we doing? Well, he says, you better get the franchise because I'm not letting go of the chopper. I'm keeping the chopper. I mean, that was the biggest vote of confidence that I ever got. And I kept hammering on Claas. And finally in 2004, we did get the franchise. And I sold our first new one that I sold. We went to Mike Youngman, which was an 870. Until a year ago, he was still running it.
And it's still in the area?
Still in the area, yes. Yep. That was the first new Claas chopper I sold 2004. The fascinating thing about Claas is all these John Deere guys I knew really well would never run them much off warranty. And they were always parked over there getting warranty work done on it, and nobody wanted to work on them themselves. So I thought, as a Claas dealer, this is going to be pretty good. When I finally got Claas's, we'll get to trade every 2-3 years like they did with their John Deeres. 4 or 5 years later, these guys are still running them, and they're fixing them themselves. They're not bringing them to us. They're loving them, and like Mike Youngman, that's 2004. I think he owned it 13.
Sold it last year, I think.
Sold it last year. So I don't know how many years that is, but it's like 7,000 hours, maybe more. They definitely proved their quality, and they're simple to work on. Customers end up working on themselves, which has been a big plus to us. I can't imagine selling a competitive brand right now when we sell them as far away as California and Montana, and then trying to keep them fixed. Granted, they're all going to have trouble, but the interesting about Claas is you can kind of help the guy over the phone and he can figure it out, and he's not mad. He's not ticked off. He's just happy you figured out a way to get him running again.
Would you consider Claas one of the biggest product engineering secrets of the 80s and 90s due to the lack of media coverage? And today, if someone had that great of a design, everyone would know about it right away, and John Deere wouldn't be able to produce the same auger box design for as long. Do you consider that, like, if this kind of innovation happened today, it wouldn't be such a secret for so long? I feel like Claas was kind of a hidden secret.
Well, I think it was to Claas's advantage that they didn't come to the States right away, right? They had that design proven before they really blew onto the scene. The North American market's still the biggest market. Mm-hmm. And when they finally came to the States, I mean, John Deere had already committed to what they designed.
And they didn't change it up until 2 years ago.
No. And then 2 years ago, they think they were going to try to copy it, but they didn't do a really good job. And Claas's design, crop flow design, is
really unchanged since the 90s, or 80s, I mean.
Yeah, pretty much their original.
Choppers we've never even seen had the same crop flow design in the 80s.
Pretty amazing, and they kept them simple, and they made them work. And I remember selling, the competitive brand, the Deere, and if you didn't hold your head just right, corn head just right, and you had your kernel processor in there, and you happened to lower it 6 inches, you'd plug. And guys got really conscious of that, and they would never dare put their head up or down too quick because they knew that. And when I can still remember demoing the first Claas with Mike in the cab, and I don't know if he's going to attest to this, but I mean, the funny thing about it, I rode him in the cab, and I had already demoed it some, and when I showed up to demo it to him, I remember how jumpy he was on the joystick. He was so jumpy. And he'd been running his Deere, right? And he was so jumpy. I go, Mike, just leave it. Just let it hammer. And he looked at me, are you kidding me? I go, nah, just let it hammer. You ain't gonna have to worry about, You remember things like that, and you just go, really? And so he was relaxed, and he came to me 2 years later and told me the maintenance on the Claas was half of what he spent on the Deere in the same time period. That was a pretty big deal. It's a big deal.
Whatever happened to Fox choppers? Like, why did they? I feel like they had the bull at the horns maybe when you were a lot younger.
The interesting thing about Fox is they actually had a pretty good design. They were similar to this, very similar, cut and through into the knives, but their heads were junk. So I hate to tell, there's no Foxes left. and they were somewhat limited resources. They were built in Wisconsin, small factory. Ironically, if they could have got the heads figured out. So that's why the Kemper head was a big deal. The Kemper head was a big deal because prior to that, nobody had rotary heads. And these chain heads were a pain. I mean, if you only used it a week a year, it wasn't such a big deal, but these custom guys had to run for 2 months. Well, you can't do that with chain heads. I mean, they're just, so Fox never had a better head, so it kind of held, everything starts in front of the machine. Claas's heads are far superior to anybody else's heads. So Fox didn't keep up, It's tough to keep up in that market. I'd hate to compete against these guys. I really would.
Well, okay, top 3 favorite choppers of all time. You only can pick 3. They'll have to start with C.
Still my all-time favorite's probably John Deere 5830. We sold a pile of them.
Only for nostalgia, not efficiency.
Not efficiency, but they ran.
I think that's your green underwear pumping through.
There's probably a lot of guys who, if they were around him, it was kind of their favorite chopper.
That was the first one with a nice hydrostat, right?
Had a nice hydrostat. The funny thing is it's all about creature comfort. They had the nice hydrostat. They had the buttons for the spout controls. On the hydrostat, they had some stuff dialed in. They had a rotary screen on the back, kept the radiator clean. The New Holland 2115 was okay too. That girl, that thing, that you started that 3406 cat motor in there, and that'd be enough for any gearhead to get kind of, woo, we got power. Them things back in that day, that was a big engine set in a self-propelled chopper. These 960s are nice. I mean, the most fun demos I've done is in these 960s. Impressive demos. So.
I'm just thinking of goofy innovations Claas had that just might have seemed minor, but what about ear savers?
Ear savers, they were the first ones to have that on their heads. And the other thing about their grass head that nobody else has done is the pickup floats independently of the whole grass head. They've been doing that since 1996. Yeah, the whole pickup floats independently of the grass head, and nobody else has that yet today. It makes their grass head day and night above everybody else. The other thing about Claas was most people are in shock if they've been running the competition and you tell them, no, you don't have to get out of the seat to sharpen the knives or the shear bar. You just put it, boom, boom, and it only takes a minute or so, right? It doesn't even, and then you stay right in the seat. Well, everybody else's chopper until a year or so ago still had to get out and pull the big covers off. The radiator being in the middle of the machine is huge. We never have to clean our radiators. Never's a long time, but it's not like you got to do it every day. I still know some guys with John Deere's got to do them two, 3 times a day. And I got guys with Claas's probably go a week without ever looking at them. Now they're finally changing that around, but Claas has had the radiator in the middle since they started building them. I still remember one of the first Claas expert camps I went to. This ex-John Deere guy who was doing the John Deere portion of the expert camp. What they do is they bring you all different models and they try to blow a lot of smoke up under your skirt about every model. I still remember him get to the John Deere and he says, okay, he flipped up the hood. This is how you sell a John Deere. All you see is engine. I never forgot that. He said, that's good to John Deere guys. Green guys, they love that engine.
It was in the middle, right?
It was in the middle and it's set in the wrong way, right? But he says, that's all that counts. That's what the green guys want. Well, the funny thing is Claas puts the engine the other way.
And in the back.
And way in the back. So their machine isn't as heavy. They don't have to have it as long. And they can pick up great big heads without putting 3,000 pounds worth of weight on the back. Them are all things we keep forgetting about when we're in sales. We just go, And Deere, under pressure, still put the engine the other way on their brand new model.
But they finally put it in the back.
They got it back there further, yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our talk from the blue and white and red and white truck. But that's how I learned a lot of things, and as a kid you absorb a lot. So I just wanted to quiz him again because I don't get to ride in his truck ever really anymore.
Well, I kind of had a reputation of I loved running beside the choppers in the field, and I never had a customer kick me out of his field. They always liked to see me show up. That was kind of fun. I still have a lot of cool customers. I realized they like to see me show up because they'd been chopping all day and I was trying to get out of the office, and I had a CB in my truck and they just wanted to talk, you know, and sometimes I'd be out there for an hour, just run beside them or jump in the cab with them. So most of my experience came from spending time with customers, and got a lot of neat customers, a lot of customers that do business with us 1,000 miles away. I wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for those customers, and my employees are the best. We got guys here that they love to be heroes and they love to be called and come to the rescue, and it makes it all work. So pretty thankful. We've been blessed. Thanks for shopping at Skolton's Equipment.
See you later. If chopping's your game, Skolton's the name. No?
Different things here, because in grass, the square corners are not as big a deal because we got issues with wrapping.